The agenda for this session is going to be focused on basically building a relationship with someone that you just conducted an informational interview with. So I'm going to start by talking about having a good conversation first, and then moving on to how do you follow up with that person after the informational interview is over. And I'll be talking more specifically about the thank you note that everyone should send after a conversation with someone, talk more specifically about things you can do to maintain your relationship with this person you just met for an informational interview. Before we talk about developing the relationship after the informational interview, I do want to spend some time talking about the actual informational interview itself and how do you have a good conversation. I think there are a couple of things to really make sure that you not only have a good conversation, but also that you are making a good impression with the person that you're speaking with. I think it's really important to be human, especially when you just start off the conversation, whether it's on Zoom or on the phone. Starting off just asking how they're doing is a good way to let them know who you are, right, as a person and what kind of matters to you. Definitely, I would recommend at the beginning, thank them for their time. And that might be a good transition from the small talk that you might have at the beginning in terms of asking each other how you're doing. You can then kind of transition to thanking them for making time to speak with you, and then offer 1, 2, or 3 reasons, really brief reasons, why you are excited to speak with them. So ideally, you'll already have written some of this, so it's important to just articulate verbally to the person, like why them in particular that you want to connect with. Definitely, I would recommend listening actively is really important to have a good conversation. Partly, it is going to be listening and being able to ask good questions, right, which I have on the slide there. So being an active listener so that you can pay attention to all of the details, every story that they're sharing with you, that's going to be really important as you begin to develop a relationship with a professional. Sharing appropriately. So let's say you're hearing them talk about their experiences or their feelings about why they were excited to go into this career field. You can share your own, right? So if they tell a story, you can share a little bit about yourself in terms of like your motivations, your interests, your experiences, your skills, and all of this can help convey your own interest in their career path. So if they say something about how, they were really excited to work on helping businesses make decisions because there's a more immediate impact than maybe some of their academic research, which would have taken years and years, then you could say like, oh, well, that's actually something that I'm really interested in. It's a reason why I want to explore this field because I get to have impact that's a little bit more immediate. So sharing appropriately so that you can kind of align your interests with theirs, right, in this particular career field. Asking good questions is really important. If you ask questions that are unique to who they are, what they have done, what their skills are, and what their experiences are, then you're going to get really good answers that will shed a new light on their own perspective. Asking questions that are open-ended is also recommended. So these are like tell me about, or these are questions that begin with how or why, not necessarily questions that are like, did you do this or not, right? Or the only answer could be yes or no. It's okay to occasionally have a couple of questions like that, but the more open-ended ones will allow the person to say more, right? And to share more of their experiences with you. So these are questions that you can also prepare ahead of time. So you can be an active listener, and there might be questions that you can ask as you hear them explain and share stories. But there are also questions that you might have had just by looking at their LinkedIn profile that you're really curious about. A couple of other things about having a good conversation is always make sure that you have a clear idea of how the professional can help you. What exactly do you want to know? What do you want to learn from them? How can they help you, essentially? And sometimes, you might have an alum or someone that you're doing an informational interview ask you, how can I help you, right? They might ask you very explicitly, how can I help you? So you'll want to have a good answer to that. Definitely don't ask for a job or a referral, right? Even if that's what you are interested in. This goes back to the idea of networking as more of developing a relationship instead of being a transaction. Especially for someone that you're talking to for the first time, they don't really know you. So it's going to be hard and it's going to put them in a very uncomfortable position if you ask them for a job or a referral because they just met you. So that's something that we definitely tell people not to do, is to not ask for a job or a referral in these initial conversations. But what you can do is you can always ask for recommendations and other connections. So what that means is if you would like to ask for resources or ideas of resources that they might have as you continue to explore a career field, that's a good question. If you want to ask them if they might have suggestions for other people that you can speak with to learn more about XYZ, we always recommend that question towards the end as well, so that you can kind of leverage this person's expertise and also their network for you to continue to learn more about a field and for you to expand your own network. A couple of tips for the virtual setting is to try to minimize as many distractions as you can. I would always recommend that you dress professionally. I think even though it's not a job interview, it's not like super high stakes like that. Now, after the informational interview is over, what do? One thing that I would recommend doing is to take notes after the informational interview is over. Ideally, you will have a spreadsheet that you're keeping track of who you're speaking with, what you're learning, when did you speak with them, what's their name, what's their role, where do they work at, right? All of these details. Take down some notes. If they shared with you a story that's unique to them, if they gave you some advice, if they gave you a book recommendation, jot that down, right? It's just information to show them that you were paying attention to this conversation. And it's important for you to help you remember that conversation too. Always send a thank you note. And we'll be talking a little bit more specifically about crafting that, sending a thank you note by email within 24 hours, ideally, and then follow up on anything needed. So, maybe sharing something with them. If they ask, feel free to send me your resume, just to have, then you can follow up with the thank you note and also attach your resume as the person asked, or anything else that might require follow up. After this conversation is over, you can then send the LinkedIn request to connect, along with a personalized note. LinkedIn has a default message, something along the lines of, I would like to connect with you. It's always nice to just write a personalized note. Dear so-and-so, it was so great to chat with you. I learned so much. And, I'd love to stay in touch with you on LinkedIn. Something simple as that can help personalize that request. And then reach out to other contacts, right? So if you had asked for other people to speak with and the person got back to you with those other people that you can speak with, or if they gave an introduction for you to speak with someone else, definitely follow up and reach out to the other people. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking more about that thank you note, because this is something that, you might not be super familiar with. I've got a sample up here that I will read out loud so that everyone can follow. Dear Bob, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I enjoyed hearing about your projects at Merck and how you leveraged your social science training as you applied for pharma jobs. Thanks as well for suggesting your 2 friends and colleagues who would be great for me to speak with. I'll wait to hear from you before reaching out to them. Our conversation has made me even more excited and optimistic about exploring careers in pharma. I look forward to staying in touch with you. This thank you note is not super long. It's a couple of sentences. It is expressing gratitude for taking the time, right, to chat, saying something explicit about what they enjoyed hearing about. So that shows them that you were an active listener, thanking them ahead of time for those connections. Now, not every conversation is going to be incredibly meaningful. If it was helpful for you, if you learned something new that you didn't know about prior to the informational interview, I would call that a success. So we're going to talk a little bit now about, okay, now that the thank you note is sent, what do you do after, right? We tend to get this question a lot in terms of like, okay, well, I had this initial conversation, I sent a thank you note, but what do I do now? Do I ask to talk again? Like, what do I do? And I think what's helpful to kind of understand at the outset is that building a relationship takes time and effort. So the same thing with building a relationship with professionals, it takes time and it takes effort. Don't put too much pressure on that relationship or rush it. Because if you imagine yourself on the other side as the professional, they're interested, they were happy to help, but they weren't necessarily signing up to help find you a job or get you a job. They weren't signing up to kind of be your lifelong mentor. So don't rush it. Don't put too much pressure on it. So kind of related to that is if you spoke with someone and they've been helpful, to you in your career, let's say in their conversation with you, offered to help you when you're actively job searching a year from now, if they offer to look over your resume or cover letter, that's amazing. You should want to stay in touch, right, in the long term. If that's something that they offer to you, not everyone is going to offer that. Some people are very interested in kind of sharing knowledge with you and their experiences with you for one conversation, but they weren't necessarily interested in the longer term, which is okay. And you might not want to stay in touch with everyone that you do an informational interview with in the long term. And that's okay too. As I said earlier, a successful informational interview is one where you learned something you didn't know, you gained a new perspective, you learned a new insight, and that means that it was successful. Use LinkedIn to stay in touch. If after you're connected with a person, if you see that they've posted something, they posted a blog, they shared a post, they shared an update, if you see that they got a promotion or they switched roles, definitely write a comment, say congratulations. If they posted an article or a blog post and it was helpful to you, feel free to comment on saying that it was helpful to you. If they were featured, if they were in the news, sometimes I get that. Some of the connections I have in my LinkedIn network are featured in the news, and I'll get an update on that. You can feel free to, post a comment. Other tips for maintaining the relationship, if there are ways to see that person again, right? If it's a conference that you could go to virtually for the time being, that might be a great way to reconnect. For people that you want to keep in touch with, using the holidays and the new year to reconnect, I think is always great. And this is where those personal details that you might remember from your initial conversation can be helpful. It's always great to reach out to someone and not necessarily have anything that you're asking for, but just to reach out, to wish them a happy new year, and to just put you on their radar again, at least in their inbox. If you have an update and if you have news to share, let's say you've started an internship, or let's say you just finished your master's degree and now you're pursuing something else, you can write back, you can send an email to them and just update them with the news, right? To say, just wanted to let you know, I just finished my degree and I'm really excited. Or, if you are starting a new position somewhere, you can reach out and say, I was so grateful for the advice that you gave me. I just want to let you know that I'm now starting a new role at this company. Any update that you can have that might be worth sharing is a good way to kind of maintain that relationship. You can feel free to also ask a follow-up question or for additional advice. I would be a little bit judicious about this in terms of, how often you want to do this. It might not be the case that you're going to send them an email too often. It might be that you wait maybe a couple weeks and be really thoughtful about what else do you want to know, right? If you have a follow-up question, you can feel free to ask that in an email. The other thing you can do is share an article. If you see an article that reminds you of the conversation that you had. And then, of course, saying thank you again when the advice that they gave you was relevant is also great, right? People love to get thank you messages out of the blue. First is our informational interview guide for graduate students and postdocs. We talk a little bit more about maintaining relationships with people that you've done an informational interview with. And then the second is our networking career course that is on the Career Services YouTube page.